Welcome back to Speedfire Fab YouTube channel. If you're new here, my name's Taylor. We're working on my wife's OBS Chevy. It's come to my attention that some people don't know what OBS means. That is old body style, specifically in the Chevrolets 88 to 98. Not to be confused with the OBS old body style Fords in the 90s. It's kind of an interchangeable slang term, I guess, in the automotive community. So that's what OBS stands for. If you are new here, you need to go back and watch some of the previous episodes of taking this truck to LS Fest, making some dumb decisions, which resulted in melting a piston and needing a new engine built. So today we're back in the shop, the new junkyard 6.2 LSA motor together, and hopefully try to get it stabbed back in the truck. Don't plan on getting it running and driving quite yet. I got some other things to work on, but I want to get the motor together. I've got all my fresh parts from Texas Speed and Summit Racing. They finally showed up. We got the fresh set of cylinder heads that we junkyard rebuilt on the tailgate of my truck in the last episode. I've got the oil pan pulled off the old engine. We got that cleaned up. I still got to pull this block off plate. This motor mount is loose, but I stripped out the bolt, the last bolt in that bolt right there. So that's what the Allen head hole is supposed to look like, and that one's completely rounded. So later in the video I'll explain my method to get stripped out bolts like that out. And then unfortunately I'm gonna have to go find a new bolt, because that's a special short countersink so that we can put the motor plates. These are adapters that adapt the 4-bolt flange of the LS motors to the 3-bolt original motor mount that came in the OBS truck. And you get a little bit of front to back adjustment, which is nice. But that'll be the last thing we put on. We're gonna get the motor together, and then I'll figure out how to get that out. And we can put the motor mounts on the new motor and proceed with trying to put them back in the truck. What's up, guys? Had to jump in here real quick and say that this video is not going to include everything that I had hoped, everything that I talked about in the beginning, because it's 3 hours long, and I know y'all don't want to sit through a 3-hour YouTube video. I wouldn't want to do it. I tried to trim it up as best as I could and time lapse through things, but I was putting together the engine. I wanted to show as much of the process as possible and explain it, and that takes time. And I wasn't going to be happy just speeding through it and putting out a 45-minute video. So this one's about an hour and a half. I hope y'all enjoy it. I hope you can maybe learn something from it and see some of the finer details of building an engine. So yeah, I just wanted to say that the rest of the stuff, we're going to get to it in another video. I have to split this up into 2 parts. So enjoy the show. First thing we got to do, I've already cleaned this piston so you can kind of see. We're going to clean up all the other ones. Make sure we clean out the bore a little bit, clean up the mating surface for the head gasket, brake clean and air blow this whole thing out, make sure there's no debris in it. I'm not going to focus too much on the exterior. I mean, it's going in the truck, you're never going to see it. But we got to get the pistons cleaned up, make sure there's no dirt or foreign objects in there, clean it out as best we can, and then we can start putting it back together. So let's get started with cleaning these pistons up. So what you want to do is rotate your engine over to whatever piston you want to clean. We want to get it right up top dead center, which is just about flush with the head surface. I could take a clean rag and put in the cylinders next to it. And then we're just going to take a wire wheel and a drill and slowly take that grime off. You can sit here and get it as perfect as you want. I'm not trying to get it perfect. I'm just trying to get that stuff off that may burn off. Once we get it running, I want to make it cleaner. As long as you're doing this on a drill, relatively low speed with the wire wheel, you're not going to damage anything, provided you have stock pistons and not aftermarket pistons that are coated in like Teflon or some high temp coating, because you're going to damage that coating if you try to do this. You also want to try your best not to get off into the head surface. You might bump it a little bit here at the edge, it's going to be okay, but you really want to focus and stay on the piston as best you can. You want to make sure you catch your rag. All right, so that's what we're trying to achieve. I'm gonna jump over to time lapse and knock the other ones out real quick because they're all the same, and then we'll move on to the next step and I'll show you how to do that. All right, the next step we're gonna do is clean out these cylinders. This time we want to put it down to the bottom of the cylinder, spray a little brake clean in there. Preferably have your engine stand turned down. And then we're gonna wipe that out. Wipe it till we get a clean rag. It's best practice to use a new piece of towel every hole. That cleaned out. I'm gonna roll this over a little bit, and we're gonna clean out the lifter bores. Not really cleaning the bores themselves, they're just cleaning this area right here where the little plastic bucket sits. You gotta remember, oil ends up everywhere inside the engine, so you don't want any dirt. You want a minimum amount of dirt. You're not building it in a perfectly clean environment. You're gonna end up with a little bit of dirt here and there. You really want to get around the edge of the piston where the ring is and make sure all that brake cleans out of there. Next thing we got to do is blow out the water jacket, which is down inside of here. And now I realize I forgot a step, so we're gonna have to end up doing that again. We gotta take a razor blade to the mating surface of the head gasket, which is gonna create more dirt and dust. So be sure and do that before you go anywhere else. You can do this with like a razor blade scraper. I like to do the razor blade by itself. I feel like, I don't know, I get a little more control. You really don't want to take a wire wheel or even like a soft pad that doesn't cut into the metal. You really don't want to do that because it is aluminum. It's soft. And you can put little microscopic grooves or indentions into it. I mean, you can with the razor blade too. You can cut. While it probably won't cause head gasket leak, it can. I'm just scraping off any of the old residue from the old head gasket. Anytime you're building an engine, it's highly recommended to have the block like this surface, as they call it, where they basically run it through a surface grinder that fly cuts the top of that and takes off a few thousandths but trues it all up. That's the right way to do it. Same thing with cylinder heads. But part of this build series is, hey, I blew all my budget on everything else, so building a second engine was not part of the plan. But also showing you guys that, yeah, it's recommended to do an engine proper and take it to the machine shop and do all this and that, but you don't actually have to. Like, you can make it work. Is it gonna last as long? Are you gonna make as much horsepower and be as competitive if you're trying to do that? Probably not. But if you want to learn some things and at least get a project going on a limited budget, and at the end of the day be able to say, man, I did that, then this is a great way to get that done. Like I said, as long as you take a few of the precautions and take your time, go slow, it's most likely going to work out pretty well for you. So the engine in the Scout, I think we put that in there 6 or 7 years ago. It's a junkyard 5.3 that we pulled apart. I actually did pull the pistons and rods out, and I believe the crank, and we put a fresh set of bearings. We did not send it to the machine shop. I do have some weird oil pressure issues in that motor. I always have. It's kind of hard to explain, but it loses pressure at a weird, kind of randomly. I don't think it's the pump. It's got a pretty new pump on it, but I always wonder if maybe because I opened up the factory stuff and I put a fresh set of rings in there, maybe it doesn't really like it. I don't know. It's very possible that I'm completely wrong there, but that's part of the reason with this one why I left the bottom end intact, and because we have done junkyard rebearing like that before and it's worked out fine. So yeah, I'm not real sure. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. I'm gonna blow it out one more time. If we would have done that first, we'd only had to blow it out once. All right, we're gonna start with putting the cam in. First, I'm gonna get rid of this long stud because I keep snagging things on it. So most of these studs have a smaller kind of like hex on the end of them. They're like usually 1/4 inch, and most of the time they're rounded out. So This one's actually in good shape, but I'm not even gonna try it. You just take 2 nuts and jam them up together, and then spin the inside nut with the wrench. Your stud will come right out. Preferably don't drop it on the concrete. You would think I would have a drip pan for this, but I do not. So we're gonna use the box. It's not gonna pour out a lot of fluid, but it will leak some. Okay, we're gonna get rid of this old tensioner. We're not gonna need that anymore. We will need the bolts. Actually, we will not need the bolts because the new one comes with longer bolts. All right, we're gonna get our new cam ready. You wanna make sure you pre-lube it. You definitely do not wanna go in there dry. The more oil, the better. You want to be very careful because as soon as you get past that first bearing, your cam's going to want to drop and move, and then your cam lobe is going to want to whack the bearing, and you don't want to damage the bearing. So slow and steady. The last couple are kind of difficult. All right, real quick before we go any further, I'm gonna explain a little learning moment, if you will, as I get oil all over everything. So you've got your cam bearing journal. You've got the cam lobes. As you can see, it's low and it's high. So your lifter actually rides on top of that. Here's an old one for. So your lifter, which connects to your push rod, which connects to your rocker arm that opens and closes your intake and exhaust valve. So you got intake and exhaust. So as this cam is spinning with the crank, it rides up there and it pushes that push rod and the rocker arm, and then that opens your valve. This is a stage 1 turbo cam from Brian Tooley Racing. So they all come with this little cam card that kind of tells you the specs. I'm not a cam expert by any means. I don't claim to know all of this, but it's somewhat self-explanatory. You got intake and exhaust duration. That's 50 thousandths lift. So basically the intake valve will be open for 217 degrees. I'm not real sure what the X is on the exhaust. Your intake and exhaust, this is total amount of lift, like the distance that this cam lobe, basically the height of this cam lobe, the distance that pushes your valve train and opens your valves. Lobe separation angle, 113 degrees. The smaller that number, the more cam chop you get at idle, typically. It's basically just the distance apart between your exhaust and intake. So that's a little bit of the cam basics that I know anyways. Again, I'm not an expert. I need to put a little bit more oil on this one. Gonna need a bolt in here. You also got to be careful at this point because I do not have the back cover on. if you're to push that camshaft, it will fall out the backside bearing. Not the end of the world, you can push it back in, but sometimes that little sudden drop on the bearing falls out can damage the bearing, and we don't want any of that. But we're about to put the gear on and the cam retainer plate, so all of that will be locked in. All right, so on your cam card, you'll notice right there it says install dot to dot. What that means, hopefully y'all can see this on the camera. There is a dot somewhere on this gear right here. Ah, it's right there. See a little dot? It's like an indentation kind of. See it? Slightly drilled dot. So what they mean by dot to dot is you want to have that up, and then you want to put the dot on your cam gear, perfectly matching it. And that will set your base, basically valve and cam train. Valve train and cam timing, that's the word. When that is up, you'll also notice that your number one piston's at TDC, which is top dead center. So that's all the way up, basically ready for the spark plug to fire and push the piston down. So we can see our dot is here. So we're gonna need to rotate our cam, which you might need a bolt to do that. Again, be careful because it wants to go in and out as you turn it. All right, so we're gonna check this out real quick. It's pretty much dot to dot, but we gotta get our chain on here. That needs to roll a little bit. All right, so this is where you take your time, because if you can see right there, again, it's real hard to see on the camera, but we're like half a tooth off, so turned it too far. This bolt's not very tight, so I can't go backwards without just loosening it up. I don't love the way that fits, but I guess it's pretty much dot to dot. All right, now that we got that squared away and we're happy with what it kind of looks like, a trial run, if you will, we're gonna put our cam retainer plate in. All right. So the cam retainer plate basically keeps the cam from walking forward, but we still have to be careful because it will walk backwards right now with the rear cover off. One thing I'll show y'all real quick, anytime you replace the cam or you open this up, it's a very good idea to change this out, because this little O-ring that's in here, and you can see like the O-ring just slightly thicker sticking out from the plate. Over time, that O-ring kind of shrinks up, and I've seen them where they get flush with the plate, if not a little less, and it starts leaking oil right here, because this is a oil galley. So it starts leaking oil on the pressure side and bleeding it back off, and if you can have a low pressure situation or an oil starving situation, because can't keep enough pressure and flow. So if you have an LS motor and you're having oil pressure issues, that could be a possibility if you've got high mileage. Pretty simple and easy fix if you do it before it gets bad. All right, because I'm videoing this and trying to teach y'all somewhat right way of doing things, I guess I will torque everything. Typically I only torque like rotating assembly and head bolts, but it's recommended that you torque everything in the engine, so I guess we will do that. If you're starting this project like this, I highly recommend getting on Google and find the torque spec sheet for your particular engine. So Summit Racing's got pretty good setup. This is the Gen 4 aluminum block LS. It doesn't mention LSA, but LS3 is basically the same thing. So cam retainer bolts, 18 foot-pounds. I've got a fancy little wrench here, but you can get away with anything cheap, really. It will get the job done. You can see my impact got them probably to 16 or 15. Maybe that one's a little low or a little high, but that'd be right. Okay, now we can put our gear on for the final time. Get this done rolled. There it goes. See how quickly it tries to fall back? All right, before I torque that down, I'm gonna spin it over. So now you don't have to worry about the cam going anywhere because it's sandwiched between this and that plate. So if you'll notice, the crank spins twice and the cam spins once. All right, so it looked a little iffy there before, but as you can see now, we are now dot to dot. That's exactly where we want to be. Pistons at top dead center. All right, now this is not needed. For whatever reason, the Gen 4 has them. Gen 3 LS never had them. So again, I don't think it's really a requirement, but one of those things that can't really hurt. I don't know, actually I do have a picture of what the old one looks like. So you watch me take this cam tensioner bracket off. It was all broken because that's what they do, they break the factory ones. This is the upgraded version. And it's really just to keep this, as this is rolling around, this side will always be tight. This side will end up being loose because of how physics kind of roll the chain. This will kind of wobble. So this just keeps everything a little more in line with each other. Again, for 40 years, small block Chevys with basically the exact same timing setup. They never had them. They're still working great. So I do firmly believe that you can get away without it. But again, it's not going to hurt anything if it's being there. But the reason the old ones fail, as you can see, there's really nothing to fail there. I mean, that chain's going to, with enough mileage, it might rub into that a little bit, but it's not going to be in constant contact. It'll kind of be slapping. On the old engine, it kind of blows my mind, but we had the original tensioner in there for whatever reason. It's a little hard to see with the oil pump, but it's got these little spring-loaded plastic guides that it rolls around. And these like to break down over time, which is, I found these lodged up in here, down in the oil pan, stuck in the pickup tube on this 6.2 when I pulled it out. And I was told it had an upgraded chain tensioner guide, but it did not. And it's not to be confused with the chain tensioner. Like the Ford overhead valve motors and even the newer Hemi Dodge motors, like they have actual timing chain tensioners. They've got a longer chain, and the tensioner actually, without the tensioner, the chain wobbles around and jumps time. So on the LS's, you don't need the tensioner. Again, that's just really a guide to make it live a little happier. Okay, what's next? Cam, shaft, sprocket, bolts. So you got to be careful here. This is a 3-bolt. Aftermarket is all 3-bolt. The factory cam in this would have been a single bolt cam. Why they did that, I'm not real sure, but they did. As you can imagine, it's a lot of abuse on a single bolt with the lineup studs. So this is what a single bolt looks like. Again, aftermarket's all 3-bolts, so you have to have a conversion. Your crank gear stays the same, but you have to have a conversion upper sprocket for the aftermarket cams, which we already had on the old motor, because for whatever reason the factory GM LS9 cam is actually a 3-bolt. So you have to make sure you're reading it right, because single bolt is, as you can see, it's 55 foot-pounds initially, and then they want you to turn 50 degrees. But the 3-bolt is just 22 pounds. Super easy. 22. What I don't love about this fancy torque wrench is you have to really watch it, because you can easily go past. It has nothing to stop you. The cheaper ones actually, the click type wrenches, they stop you. You can't go past it. Get the lifters put in, and then we'll put the heads on. So the lifters are pretty easy. One thing before you put lifters in, take them out of they kind of come pre-soaked in oil. Take them out, put some oil in a bucket, and let them soak overnight. When you first put them in there, you'll actually see little air bubbles popping up, because these are hydraulic lifters, meaning oil, they get pressurized with oil inside. They're kind of like a shock, or like a hydraulic cylinder, basically. They get pressurized with oil, and that takes some abuse out of there's a lot of harmonics that happen in the camshaft with the lifters, and that takes some of that noise out going up to your valve train and makes it quieter. In a lot of race applications, you would use a solid roller, which is basically that. Imagine a hardened chunk of solid round bar with a roller wheel on it, and it's got a little indentation for the for your push rod. So those applications, they're better because these rob a little horsepower at certain RPMs. Very, very minor, but they're much more street friendly. But if you don't kind of pre-bleed them, which is basically what we're doing there, you can get in a situation where it takes a while for the oiling system to bleed them out, and you get some air pockets and you get some valve train noise that's kind of unwanted. So that's another one of those best practices. All right, we got a fresh set of lifter trays. And basically what that means is, where's my old lifter? So the lifters had these little square in there. You can see the roller. It's a round bar and a round hole. So if you didn't have these lifter trays that lock in to that square and hold it, these would just spin. As you can imagine, your cam's going this way. You do not want this spinning 90 degrees and your cam going opposite of that roller. It'd just eat that roller up. A lot of the aftermarket expensive lifters are what they call tie bar, where there's basically like a rivet in each one, and there's a metal bar that keeps them from rolling, and that locks in. These are fine for most applications. If you're pulling apart a junkyard engine or anything, you want to change these out. I want to say they're like $50, because if you try to reuse the original plastic that's 20 years old, and it's over time it's heat cycles and it's starting to deteriorate, even though it looks good, if that plastic housing breaks and this spins, you're going to be in that same boat. You're going to destroy everything. It doesn't happen very often. It really doesn't happen at all that I've ever seen personally, but it's good insurance to just change these out. You don't need anything fancy. The OEM style ones are best. These are actually, I think, a GM part, So this is as easy as we're gonna put our bucket up here, pull these bolts out, putting the lifter in this, locking it in like that. They fit very snug. There's an oil hole here, and that's how it gets oil injected into the cylinder, the hydraulic cylinder, if you will. It doesn't really matter which way they go because the whole bottom of this bore is wore out. Not wore out, but it's machined out because there's an oil galley that goes all the way through, an oil passage. So it doesn't really matter. Those can go left or right. My OCD tells me to put them in this way because the oil's feeding this way. I mean, again, it doesn't really matter. You're just gonna kind of work them down. We'll put the bolts in them in a minute. As you can see, they have these notches, but the notch isn't needed everywhere. They're universal. They'll go in any spot. You just have to make sure you put them the right way. And this is basically what the drip pan, or in my case the drip box, is for, because this oil is going to drip down. They fit snug in those in the plastic, so when they're in there, they're kind of, they can flex around a little bit, so you have to kind of jiggle them until they fit nice where you want them in there, down in the bore. You definitely don't want to force them. You don't want to hammer them. None of that. I'm gonna go do the other side. And if you're building an LS, especially a kind of a junkyard or even a stock rebuild, go buy the GM LS7. Doesn't matter if you got an LS1, a 5.3, a 6.0, a 6.2. Oh man, I forgot to take the bolt out. Go buy the LS7 lifters. They're the best design factory lifter they've ever made. They will fit in any LS. Unless you're trying to make crazy power or competition stuff, there's really no need for the aftermarket. Unless you just want to. And there's nothing wrong with buying a factory set that come in your 5.3 or 6.0, but the LS7 the GM tweaked the design. I'm not exactly sure what they changed, but some of the earlier lifters have known to be failing point, I guess. These are much better. All right, got that in there. I'm gonna change my gloves again. Clean up the mess on the floor. Now we can put those hold down bolts in and torque them down. A lot. I don't know what that is in foot-pounds. Probably doesn't translate. We're gonna put just a little bit of oil in the cylinders. The cylinders they naturally get slightly lubed from the piston squirters, and the bottom of the pistons as everything's kind of moving up and down. The lower oil ring keeps everything from going into the combustion chamber, but I want to just make sure those rings are kind of seated in there. I mean, they're already seated because the junkyard motor, but I want to make sure there's enough lube on fire up. Okay. Let's roll this up this way. We can put the heads on. All right, we got a fresh set of ARP head studs. You remember back to the last video, we had ARP head bolts in the other motor. ARP bolts are definitely better than the factory bolts. All of the factory bolts, all of your rotating assembly bolts, your main bolts, your head bolts, all that stuff are torque to yield, which means they're designed by GM to be used one time and one time only. They've engineered the stretch. We're getting nice stickers. So studs, bolts work fine, and with the ARP bolts, you're just getting a better quality, better engineered bolt that's designed to be used over and over again. But with a bolt, you're screwing it down into your head and then you're torquing it. So you're pulling against the threads in your block, right? You're pulling up, and you're putting a slight kind of twist, elongation in that bolt when you get to your torque spec, and that's what holds everything down. Whereas a stud, you've got this threaded in your block, not crazy tight, not crazy torqued where it's starting to stretch it. You put your head on there and you're tightening your nut. And because you're turning the nut, you're actually getting proper clamping force like you would on a C-clamp. You're getting clamping force versus that torsional kind of squeezing it down, and it's less abuse on the studs. And honestly, studs are just the best route for boost, because under boost it tries to lift the cylinder heads up and you need all the clamping force you can get. It's been several years since I've done this, so I'm going to read the instructions. Inspect all hardware. Looks pretty decent. Engine block and cylinder heads must be flat and have the proper surface finish for the head gasket used, or gasket failure may result. It's good enough. Ensure proper thread engagement, accurate torque readings, Clean all thread in the block. I've already looked at the block thread. It looks pretty decent. Blown it out. Before final assembly, a mock-up of the engine or components to check the fit and clearance around the fasteners is recommended. Yeah, we might just skip that step. Clean the faces, cylinder head, install head gasket and cylinder head. All right, that's exactly what I remembered. So we gotta dig gaskets out here. So you'll notice they say front. And then they will say what they're for because the bore is different. So like you wouldn't want to put a 4.8 or a 5.3 gasket onto a 6.2. Because your gasket will be smaller than your bore, and that's just going to cause problems. It clearly doesn't matter which side they go on because that could be there, this could be here. There's what they call MLS head gaskets, which means multi-layer steel. There's different types of head gaskets. The inner in here is kind of has like a stamped, like embossed area on it. All right, cylinder head number 1. Clean enough for a junkyard build. Line it up on our... Oh, you know what I forgot to do though? We got to get a picture. You gotta document the build and add to the 20,000 photos in your phone. All right, that's down in there. All right, so you got to make sure, and it even says in the instructions, you got to make sure these little seats down here where your washer is going to sit is clean, because if the washer doesn't sit flat, it can cause issues with the clamping force. It's the wrong way, dummy. These have a little Allen head in here to put them in. Again, the studs themselves do not get torqued, because that's part of the benefit of studs, is you're not putting torsional torque necessarily on the bolt itself. So we're just going down and snugging them up. Normally I would use the impact for this, but I broke my 3/16 Allen socket a while back and just failed to get a new one. So we'll just time lapse through this and get past the boring part and get to the torquing of everything. Have kind of a serrated, I don't know, it's not really serrated, it's kind of, I don't know, they have a rough side and they have a smooth side. The rough side goes down. These are all 12 point headed, and you can't see that at all. So you want to make sure you got a 12 point socket. All right, so it comes with this ARP assembly lube. It's just some black goop. You want to put it along the, I can't ever really remember how much, but you want to coat the bottom of your nut. Not real sure the science behind that. It's probably got something to do with the, since we're not turning the stud, we're turning the nut. Kind of lubes it up and make sure it spins freely while it's torquing, maybe. I don't know, if somebody knows that, then feel free to leave a comment so I can learn. I'm sure I could Google it, but I don't have time for that right now. And knowing how that works in this moment is not really going to help me get this done, so worry about that on another day. Oh, you're supposed to lubricate the threads too. Well, I guess all of these have had a little too much and it got down in the threads, so we'll be all right. We're not going to torque them, we're just going to run them down. Not even enough to... You always want to kind of work in a star pattern. Jump around a little bit. Again, we're not tightening, I'm just getting the nut down to the washer so I don't have to turn as much with the torque wrench. So this is where it gets interesting. Look at our instructions. These are going to be different. If you're using aftermarket bolts, you have to use a torque spec for those bolts. You won't use the GM factory sheet. So we're basically going to do this 4 times. 30, 60, 90. Well, I guess it's 3 times. 30, 60, 90 for all the big bolts, and then we'll come in and put the little ones, the 28 foot-pounds. And you want to make sure you follow this procedure. I'm pretty sure it's the same if you're using stock bolts, but the GM, the Summit spec sheet or whatever you're using has that, I believe. No, it does not, but it's easy to find. But again, you always want to start in the middle and you kind of work out in like a spiral. If you start one into the other, what will happen is you'll end up kind of warping the cylinder head and it may or may not leak. So you definitely want to follow that. You want to go slow and be extra precise. So as you can see here, we're going to do 1 through 10, which is just the big bolts. We'll come back and do the little ones at the very last because those are not, these are sealing the cylinders. This is just kind of sealing around the lifter area. All right, we want the shortest extension possible. The more extensions you have, the more it changes can change your torque. All right, I'm gonna jump to my bigger wrench to get a little more leverage to do the 90. You might need a smaller wrench and then a bigger one. My small one will go to 90, but the more leverage you got, the easier it's gonna be. I don't really want to fight with it. You heard me talk earlier about if you're running factory bolts. Remember, you should change your head bolts if you're running factory bolts because they're torque to yield. Multiple times I have reused factory head bolts with 0 problem. So it can be done, but it's not recommended. If you do it and it fails because I said it works, then that's going to be on you. I'm just telling you my past experience. But factory head bolts, you're going to see a little bit different torque information. So you're going to start with 22, 90, and 70 degrees. That's rather difficult to do with a regular manual torque wrench or even that fancy one I have. They make other torque wrenches that have a degree indicator, but it's basically self-explanatory like it sounds. You're going to torque to your 22 and you're going to roll it down 90 degrees. Doesn't matter what the torque spec is, it's 90 degrees. And then you're going to go 70 past that at your next round. Now the 90 ain't too bad because you can eyeball it with your cylinder head and you can turn it 90 degrees. But the oddball 70 is where it gets a little bit tricky. So we're going to set this to 90. See if I can get away without the extension. Yes. So see, this one clicks. This is a normal click type wrench, and you can't really go, it's very difficult to go past the click because it kind of keeps you from doing so. It's definitely a workout. And the real fun is when you get to do a diesel engine and it's 200, 300, 400 foot-pounds on things, depending on the size. All right, so next we're gonna do the upper small bolts, 28 foot-pounds. We'll jump back to the smaller wrench for that. And it's kind of the same way. We're going to do 11, 12, 13. We're going to bounce back, forth. Good thing is it's not something you really have to remember because you buy bolts, they give you a sheet like this. If you're using factory bolts, well, you can find that information in the diagram pretty much anywhere. All right, there we have it. One side done. Now we can knock out the other side. bolts torqued, head studs torqued. I did realize something. So I put the heads on this way because these two front pieces were the best. I don't know, this one looks terrible, so I flipped it. They can go either direction. But in the truck, these little steam ports are at the front, and then the backs are blocked off. So now I have them backwards. So this is like a vent, like a steam vent line for the heads to kind of relieve some pressure and help with like air pockets in the system. So it's supposed to go like this, and it goes up to the radiator. But now we're in a situation where that is there. It's probably going to hit the oil pressure sensor. And I have heard that it's better if you have steam port on all four corners. So I think I have an extra set of these, extra one of these. I can maybe modify it and put one front and back. I'm not sure. We'll have to kind of. Worst case, I just have to pop out that little tiny freeze plug, clean these threads out, and I think I have some block off plates. I'm pretty sure one of these engines has block off plates. I don't know. I'm gonna have to figure that out. I'm not pulling them heads back off. I might regret that decision, but oh well. We've got to check for push rod clearance because depending on the true thickness of the head, the thickness of the block, the thickness of the head gasket, kind of determines what length push rods you need. So if you can read that at 7.400, which is factory LS length 080, means they're 80 thousandths thick. The wall is 80 thousandths thick, so these are hardened chromoly push rods. And you can see they're like one piece machined, whereas the factory ones have this little ball welded on it. These are twice as heavy, they're twice as thick. You start getting into crazy lift cams and high RPM and extra horsepower, these little balls can snap off, or these can bend really easily. So we already had upgraded ones in the old engine. We just have to double check and make sure that they are the right length. And I have a push rod length checker, but we're gonna start with just putting these in. And we will see what they feel like. And hopefully we don't have to order different ones. But I have a feeling we're probably gonna have to order different ones. As you can see, some of these are offset and they're kind of different. You want to make sure, I always pull everything off as the same kind of complete unit and put them back on that way. But if you want to completely disassemble them and separate everything, that's fine. You just need to make sure that you're putting it all back properly. You want these centered up on there. There is a I can show you here. There's a little radius cradle that sits down in this little bearing, so that will kind of center them once they get down there. What you have to remember is you're tightening them, your cam is where it's at. So as you tighten them, you're just going to start opening your valves because your cam is basically set. But if you'll rotate everything over a little bit, so we're going to bring number 1 up to bring number 1, basically both of them closed. Might have to look on the internet. I don't remember how tight or how loose the push rods are supposed to be. Most of the time I get lucky and I don't have to buy special length ones. I don't know, look, I don't know everything. I Google things myself because sometimes I got to refresh myself, refresh my brain. Might have to watch a video. Oh, YouTube University. All right, so this is saying we're going to take these off temporarily. Pretty sure it's at top dead center, but we're going to go in here through the plug hole and we're going to check her. I can't get the camera in that spark plug hole to show you, but I'm just watching it with my light until that piston starts coming up. I'm going to find my push rod checker, which I already found the other day. I'm going to turn it out 10 turns, but you can see it's got a little line right here. You probably can't see it, but now we're going to tighten this back down. So that's too long or too short. I'm going to pull that out and go, I'm going to do 2 more turns, 10, 11, 12. Might be a little tight. Let's back it off to 11. I don't know, I feel like I'm probably okay here. So each one is 50 thousandths of an inch. Oh, we gotta add This is going to be 6.8. Alright, so 12 would be the exact same as the other ones. You want just a little bit of side-to-side play. Alright, I'm rolling with 7 400s. I think that's right where we need to be, which is great news. So now we just got to rotate all these around and torque them. Whatever this thing says. Rocker arm bolts, 22 foot-pounds. You do want to make sure that both of them are closed. You don't want to torque them down when everything's opened up. So roll the motor around. Alright, let's put this pump on here. We're then going to take some of our lovely 1540 Rotella. We're going to pour those in here. And then we're going to rotate it over. If we do it right, we should get a little bit of oil out the bottom side there, all everywhere but my box apparently. I'm not as super worried about initial startup oiling because again all this stuff is still coated in oil. I just want to make sure we coat that pump. Now we can put our pickup tube, whatever I did with that. It's over here. But we got to put the windage tray in there. I'm curious. This is the one off the 6.2. I'm curious if it's the same as the 6.0. Look, it's exactly the same. It's just the 6.0 they tell you where the rear is. The 6.2 they tell you where the front is. That's rather interesting. And the same this way. And they're practically identical. But I'm putting this back on here because it is what came on here. If you've never torn anything down like this or worked on anything like this, or if you think it's going to be a while before you put it back together, highly, highly, highly recommend Ziploc bags, label and everything. I've done enough of this that I have a pretty good idea where the bolts go most of the time. But anytime I do something that I've never done before, never tore apart, I usually bag it. Bag it and tag it. Okay. Where'd my O-rings go? Now's about the point in the project where you start throwing the crap away. There they are. Not real sure what the difference is between the red and the green, but sucker had the green on it. The green's a little thicker, so we're gonna go with the green. But the new green, not the old green. Put a little lube around that. Make sure that gets locked in there. Just like that. Put this bolt here. Alright, let's wipe this down. Looks pretty clean, but razor blade it real quick. Just make sure we blade away from the inside. Just like that. I already got this thing all shined up. We just got to snake the pickup in the hole. We are loosely going to install this because the front and rear covers bolt into the pan, and there's a certain procedure you have to do, otherwise they will leak. Alright, again, we're just going to barely tighten these. I still want the oil pan loose, but I don't want it to hang either. We're going to coat the cam. I'm going to coat the rockers up here. We're going to spin it over a little bit, and that's going to kind of contain some of that. All right, here's a good view of how the lifters and the cam kind of work. Hold the camera and rotate at the same time. So you got your lifter on the right side there. You can't really see the roller, but it's on the flat lobe of the cam right now. So the valve is closed. Now we're going to start getting to the lobe. You're going to see that lifter go up into the hole. So now we're at max lift. Intake, the exhaust valve on that one is completely open. And then you can kind of see back in there at the front, the intake is starting to open. So the exhaust is now completely closed. Intake is open. It's sucking in air fuel. Intake is closed, and I think we should be on the probably the power stroke, I guess, but you get the point, hopefully. All right, well, like I said earlier in the beginning of the video, I had to cut it short. I had to split this thing into two parts to keep it in a reasonable time frame. I think an hour and a half is still a little bit too much, but you also got to have a good stopping point, so it was harder to shorten it up past there. Hopefully I'll get the edit done. This edit really kicked my butt. It was a lot of clips. 6 or 7 hours worth of camera footage that I had to trim down. So it really tested my patience and tested my skills, and it was a challenge. That's why I was kind of late on posting my normal sometime around Thursday posts. But I'll try to get this second part up within the next few days of y'all watching this one. And we should be able to get the rest of the motor together and get it in the truck. And if you haven't figured it out now, this is future me. All of that's already been done. And I'll just say that there were some other complications that happened after the motor got in the truck, so be sure and stay subscribed and stick around to see what ends up happening with that. Again, thank y'all for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something, and hopefully it wasn't too boring and too long. If it was, please let me know in the comments, and maybe I'll do it different next time. Who knows? Y'all have a good one.